Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a man who watched his uncle empty out a dying grandfather's farmhouse in 2 days, smiled, drove to the office, and quietly pulled a recorded trust from the archive that no deathbed signature could ever override. Pour the coffee. Stay close. My uncle thought he stole the family farm from a dying man. He did not know the grandson at the deathbed had drafted the trust 10 years earlier. My name is Daniel Whitlock. I am 46 years old, I live on the north side of Topeka, Kansas, and for the last 19 years, I have worked as an estate litigation paralegal under the same supervising attorney. On a cold Tuesday in March, my mother called me from the hospital parking lot in Manhattan, Kansas, and told me Grandpa had 2 days, maybe 3. Then she said the part she did not want to say. Uncle Royce had been at the farmhouse since Sunday with a notary and a brown leather briefcase, and Grandpa had signed something. I sat in my car in the firm's parking garage with the heater going and watched my own breath fog the windshield. I could smell stale coffee in the cup holder and hear the fluorescent buzz of the garage lights through the cracked window. I already knew what Royce had made him sign. What Royce did not know was that in October of 2016, sitting at a conference table in our firm with a yellow legal pad in front of me, I had drafted the trust that made that signature worth less than the ink it was written in. People think the law is loud, the law is quiet. The law is a recorded document in a fireproof drawer waiting for the right grandson to walk in and ask for it by name. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. I want to know who is with me on this one. From the outside, the Whitlock family looked like something off a Christmas card mailed from a small Kansas town. 320 acres of wheat and soybeans west of Wamego, a white 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, a red barn that my grandfather repainted every other summer, and a kitchen that always smelled like burnt percolator coffee and the cheap cinnamon of those off-brand rolls my grandmother used to bake on Sundays. My grandfather, Harlan Whitlock, had farmed that land since he came home from Korea in 1955. He had 3 children. My mother, Carol, my uncle, Royce, and my Aunt Patty, who moved to Wichita in the 80s and made a quiet life teaching 2nd grade. The farm was supposed to be the spine of this family. In a way it was. It was also the bone everyone was waiting to break. Royce was the oldest. He was the kind of man who wore a clean white shirt to feed cattle and made sure everyone noticed. He had a real estate brokerage in Topeka, a second wife named Brenda, who I never trusted, and a habit of calling himself a steward of the family legacy at every Thanksgiving table for as long as I can remember. He used that word, steward, like a man trying on a coat he had not paid for. When Grandpa would say something gentle, like the land belonged to all of us in the way the wind did, Royce would laugh that short, dry laugh and say, "Someone has to actually run it, Pop." That was his favorite sentence. Someone has to actually run it. He said it the year my mother lost her job at the co-op. He said it the year my cousin Lila asked if she could lease the south pasture to start a small horse rescue. He said it the year my grandmother died, and we were all sitting on the porch trying to remember the sound of her laugh. The 2 warning signs were small, so small that for years I told myself I was making them into something they were not. The first was the night I turned 23 and announced I had taken the paralegal job in Topeka. Royce sat across from me at the long pine table and said, "Real careful, that it was good I had picked a job a man like me could actually finish. Picked a job a man like me could actually finish." I did not understand what he meant until much later. The second was a Sunday in 2014 when I drove out to help Grandpa fix a section of fence and found Royce in the office off the kitchen, with the farm's deed open on the desk and a yellow highlighter in his hand. He smiled when he saw me. He said he was just making sure Pop had things organized. He said it the way a fox tells a hen he is just admiring her feathers. I did not say anything that day. I went home, I sat at my own kitchen table, and I picked up the phone and called my supervising attorney, Mr. Linwood Avery. I told him I needed help with something that might be nothing. He told me to come into the office on Monday. That was the call that started everything. It was not nothing. It was the beginning of the folder. For a long time after my grandmother died, the farm went quiet. Royce stopped highlighting deeds at the kitchen table. He stopped saying the word steward at Thanksgiving. He even started bringing Brenda's pumpkin pie like a man trying to be liked instead of obeyed. My mother told me on the phone one night that maybe people change when their parents start to fail. I wanted to believe her. I am the kind of son who wants to believe his mother. But I had been working estate litigation for 11 years by that point, and I knew the look of a man who has gone quiet because he is finally close to the thing he has been waiting for. Royce had gone quiet the way a cat goes quiet before it puts its weight on the floor. In February, Grandpa fell in the upstairs hallway and broke his hip. By the time the surgeon was done explaining the risks, we already knew the answer in our own throats. He was 89. He had farmed for 68 years. The body had finished what it came to do. Royce flew home from a real estate conference in Phoenix the next morning. He showed up at the hospital in a navy blazer with a folded handkerchief in the pocket, kissed Grandpa on the forehead, and told the rest of us he would handle everything. He said that word again, handle. The same way he used to say steward. The same way he used to say someone has to actually run it. We all nodded because we were tired and afraid, and because nobody in our family had ever learned how to say no to Royce without paying for it later. That was the moment the small thing became the big thing. A week later, he announced his plan to the family in the hospital cafeteria over plastic trays of beige food, and it sounded almost kind. He said he had spoken to a friend who was a notary, a sweet woman named Donna, and that she could come out to the farmhouse so Pop could sign a few simple documents to make probate easier on everyone. To spare us, he said. To spare us. That word stuck to the inside of my mouth for 2 days. I asked him what documents. He said just clean up paperwork, nothing fancy. The kind of thing a lawyer would charge $5,000 to do that a notary could do in 20 minutes for free. He looked right at me when he said the part about the lawyer. He smiled like he was being generous. My mother reached under the table and squeezed my hand because she could feel me about to speak. I did not speak. I drove home that night and I did not sleep. This is the part I have to slow down for, because this is the part that decides the rest of the story. On Sunday, March 7th, at 2:14 in the afternoon, my Uncle Royce drove out to the farmhouse west of Wamego with Donna the notary in the passenger seat and a brown leather briefcase in the back. I know the time because Donna later admitted it in a deposition. I know the briefcase because my cousin Lila saw it from the porch when she pulled up to drop off a casserole. I know what Grandpa was wearing because my mother had laid the clothes out for him that morning. Dark green flannel shirt, faded jeans, the thick wool socks my grandmother knitted for him in 1991. He was in the hospital bed they had moved into the front parlor so he could see the wheat field from the window. The room smelled like menthol rub and the cold, dry air that comes off a Kansas field in March. Outside, the wind was loud. Inside, my grandfather could not lift his own water glass. Royce sent my mother and my Aunt Patty into town for groceries. He told Lila he needed the parlor for a few minutes. He closed the parlor door. Donna later said that he laid the documents out on the rolling bedside table. She said he read them aloud to Grandpa in a low, patient voice, the way you read a story to a child. She said Grandpa asked twice what year it was. She said Grandpa asked once if Carol knew. Royce said Carol knew. Carol did not know. Donna said she felt something twist in her stomach, but she was being paid $800 in cash for the afternoon, and she had a daughter in community college, and she had been told this was a simple family matter. She watched my grandfather, who could not lift a water glass, hold a pen, and she watched my uncle gently steady his hand. 3 pages. 3 signatures. A transfer of the farm, all 320 acres, all mineral rights, the farmhouse, the barn, the equipment, into a Kansas LLC named Whitlock Heritage Holdings. Sole member, Royce Whitlock. Date of execution, March 7th. 2 days before hospice intake. When my mother got back with the groceries, Royce was making coffee in the kitchen and humming. He kissed her on the cheek. He said, All done. Nothing to worry about. Just some cleanup so probate is smooth. He smiled at me when I walked in the door an hour later. He told me I should be proud of him for taking care of the family. He used the word family twice in one sentence. My grandfather was asleep in the parlor with his mouth open, his hand still curled around an invisible pen. I stood in the doorway of that parlor for a long time. I looked at the wool socks my grandmother had knitted in 1991. I looked at the dust on the windowsill where I used to set my elbows as a boy. I did not cry. I did not fight. I waited. Some kinds of theft do not look like theft. Some kinds of theft look like a navy blazer and a folded handkerchief and a man humming over a coffee pot. I drove home to Topeka that night with the heater on full and the radio off. I called Mr. Avery from the parking lot of a gas station outside Manhattan, and I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said one sentence. He said, "Daniel, pull the 2016 file in the morning. I want it on my desk by 8. I sat there in that gas station parking lot under a humming yellow light, and for the first time since February, my hands stopped shaking. I knew exactly which drawer it was in. I knew exactly what was inside. If you have ever watched a relative dress up cruelty in the language of family, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know I am not alone tonight." The morning after Grandpa signed those papers, I was at the firm by 7. The archive room at Avery and Stoltz is in the basement, behind a heavy door with a code lock, and it smells like old paper and the faint mint of the dehumidifier. I walked past the row of black cabinets that hold the closed files from the years I cut my teeth on, and I stopped at the one marked 2015 to 2017. I opened the third drawer. I pulled the manila folder with my own handwriting on the tab. Whitlock, Harlan. Irrevocable Family Trust. Executed October 18, 2016. Inside that folder were 41 pages. Pages I had drafted on a yellow legal pad in Conference Room B, while Mr. Avery walked me through the language clause by clause. The trust placed the entire farm, all 320 acres, the farmhouse, the barn, the equipment, the mineral rights, into an irrevocable trust with my grandfather as settler and my mother, my Aunt Patty, and, yes, Royce, as equal beneficiaries. The trustee was Mr. Avery. The trust was irrevocable. The trust was recorded with the Pottawatomie County Register of Deeds on October 24, 2016. The trust contained a clause Mr. Avery had insisted on, in language so clean it sounded almost gentle, that no transfer, sale, gift, or conveyance of the trust property by the settler in his individual capacity after the date of execution would be valid, regardless of competency, signature, or notarization. The land was no longer my grandfather's to give. It had not been his to give since the autumn of 2016. Royce had spent $800 in cash and the last good afternoon of his father's life to transfer a parcel of land my grandfather no longer legally owned. I stood in the basement archive of that law firm at 7:15 in the morning, and I did something I had not done in 19 years. I sat down on the cold floor with that folder in my lap, and I cried for 1 whole minute. Then I stood up, I brushed off my pants, and I walked upstairs to file the petition. By 2 o'clock that same afternoon, Mr. Avery and I had drafted and filed in the District Court of Pottawatomie County a petition to void the March 7 transfer, declare Whitlock Heritage Holdings LLC a nullity as to the farm property, and confirm the irrevocable trust as the sole valid owner of record. Attached to the petition were certified copies of the 2016 trust, the recorded deed, my grandfather's medical records from February, showing the hip surgery and the cognitive decline, and a sworn affidavit from Donna the notary that Mr. Avery had quietly secured at 11 that morning over a phone call I will never forget for as long as I live. Donna cried on that call. She said she had a daughter in community college. She said she had been told it was a simple family matter. Mr. Avery told her, in the calm voice he used on the worst days, that she could either be a witness or a defendant, and that the choice was hers and that she had until noon. She faxed the affidavit at 11:47. Grandpa went into home hospice the next morning. He died 9 days later in the parlor, with my mother holding his left hand and my Aunt Patty holding his right. I was the one who closed his eyes. Royce was not there. He was in Topeka, in the offices of a defense attorney named Marlon Beck, learning for the first time that the farm had been wrapped in steel 4 years before he ever wrote a single line of his beautiful little LLC. After the funeral, I expected the calls. They came in slow at first. My Aunt Patty called me on a Wednesday night, crying so hard I could barely understand her, asking me how I had known. I told her I had not known. I told her I had only suspected, and that suspicion had been enough to make me ask Mr. Avery, in 2016, for one extra clause on one extra page. My mother stopped speaking to Royce entirely. Brenda left Royce 3 months later. The real estate brokerage in Topeka lost its biggest client when the story quietly made the rounds among the local bar. Lila started leasing the South Pasture for her horse rescue, the way she had wanted to all along, and she named the first rescued mare after my grandmother. I moved into a small rental house in North Topeka with a fenced yard, and that summer I adopted a thin, scared border collie from a shelter outside Lawrence. I named her Hattie, after my grandmother. She sleeps at the foot of my bed, and she puts her chin on my knee when I read. My partner, a quiet, kind woman named Renata, who teaches 3rd grade and brings home library books in stacks of 4, moved in with me the following spring. She is the first person who ever knocked before opening my bedroom door. I did not know how much that small thing would mean until she did it the first time. The folder stayed in my desk drawer at the firm. Every once in a while, in those first slow years after Grandpa died, I would pull it out and look at it. Not because I needed to, just to remember that the law is quiet, and that a quiet thing in a fireproof drawer can stop a loud man in a navy blazer. Royce went quiet for a long time after the petition was granted. Quiet the way he had gone quiet the year before Grandpa fell. I knew that quiet. I waited. 2 years after the funeral, on a Thursday afternoon in October, the call came. Royce's defense attorney, Mr. Beck, asked if I would be willing to meet with Royce in person. Royce was bankrupt. The brokerage was gone. Brenda was gone. He had lost the appeal. He had lost the second appeal. He had been formally suspended from the Kansas Real Estate Commission for an unrelated matter that I suspect was not unrelated at all. Mr. Beck said Royce wanted to apologize. Mr. Beck said Royce wanted to ask for one small thing. He did not say what the small thing was. He did not need to. I told Mr. Beck I would come on one condition. The meeting would be in Conference Room B at Avery and Stoltz, the same conference room where I had drafted the trust in 2016. I brought the folder. I had not opened it in 11 months. Royce was already seated when I walked in. He had lost 40 pounds. The navy blazer was gone. He wore a gray sweatshirt and the same kind of cheap drugstore reading glasses my grandfather used to keep on the kitchen windowsill. He stood up when I came in. He tried to smile. I did not smile back. I sat down across from him. I laid the folder flat on the table between us, and I waited. He started slow. He said he had made mistakes. He said he had been under pressure. He said Brenda had wanted things. He said the brokerage had been struggling. He said he had only ever been trying to keep the family legacy alive. Family legacy. He used that phrase 3 times in 2 minutes. Then he said the sentence he had come to say. He asked me, very softly, if there was any way the family could agree to lease back even 10 acres of the South Pasture to him. Just 10 acres. Just so he could try to start something small. Just so he could feel like he had a place to come home to. I opened the folder. I turned it around so he could read it right side up. I tapped the recorded date on page 1. October 24th, 2016. I tapped the irrevocability clause on page 9. I tapped the line at the bottom of page 12 where his own name appeared, in my own handwriting, as one of the 3 equal beneficiaries Grandpa had wanted to protect from him. from himself. I let him look at his own name on that page for a long, quiet moment. Then I leaned forward and I said the only sentence I had come to say. I said, "Uncle Royce, someone had to actually run it." He did not answer. He could not. I closed the folder, I picked it up, I stood, and I walked out of conference room B with my back as straight as my grandfather's had been the day he came home from Korea in 1955. I did not slam the door. I did not raise my voice. The hallway smelled faintly of the lemon polish the cleaning crew used on Thursday afternoons. My hands were perfectly still. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. Tell me in the comments which line in this story stayed with you the most. I read everyone. I drove home that night the long way, on the 2-lane that winds north along the river toward Wamago. The sun was setting behind the wheat fields, the same color it had been the spring Grandpa died. I rolled the window down a little so I could smell the cold dirt and the dry stubble. I thought about the boy I had been at 23, sitting at that long pine table while my uncle told him he had picked a job a man like him could actually finish. I wanted to reach back through 23 years and put a hand on that boy's shoulder. I wanted to tell him that the job he had picked was the only job in the whole world that could have saved his grandfather's farm. I wanted to tell him that the quiet ones are not the small ones. I wanted to tell him that being underestimated by cruel people is not a wound. It is a gift you do not get to open until later. I wanted to tell him that one day, in a conference room that smelled like lemon polish, he would lay 41 pages of his own handwriting in front of the man who had laughed at him, and he would not need to raise his voice because the law is quiet, and so was he, and so was the grandfather who taught him how to wait. I drove the rest of the way home with the window down and the radio off, and when I pulled into my driveway, Hattie was already waiting at the front door, and Renata had left the porch light on.